This show is proudly brought to you by the #Me Network. Access granted.
Hi and welcome to the podcast. I'm Raj. My background is in film, design, media and technology.
And I'm Mike, and you may know me from such ventures as Barcamps, Wavedet, Google Apps, and every social network going.
You're here because you're a Kiwi that either works in or has a passion for tech media in New Zealand. Let's start with the news, Rick. What's happened this week? Well, first thing that came to my mind was the hackathon in Auckland. The hackers descended in Auckland this weekend. Basically, you add design plus coding and a high amount of coffee, and you get the first ever hackathon. It was attracted about 300 people this weekend. While hack is widely regarded as an evil word, these hackers aren't attacking websites or stealing your credit card numbers. The goal is to fix Auckland's problems. They are called civic hackers. A hacker has negative connotations, but it's a good word. Hacking is actually finding a problem and figuring it out, how to improve something or solve a problem. Developers and techies were plugged in for about 48 hours, and they used government data to brainstorm ideas, create code, build apps, try and improve Auckland's transport woes. So these hackers were more about using data to help you get home rather than stealing your credit card numbers. Nice work.
Top work, those guys in Auckland. We also all probably heard that Xero is ranked number 1 by Forbes. They beat out 99 other companies, including Coca-Cola, next week in Hyundai, in the Forbes Most Innovative Growth Companies list. Based on a measure of how much investors have bid up the stock, and we know that's going up, price of the company above the value of the existing business is based on expectations of future innovative results. So this is all based around how people are viewing Xero and where they're going to go. So, despite ongoing losses, 35 million this time around, at Xero, the revenue growth is impressive, and the confidence held both within the company and by the investors is riding on an all-time high. Go Kiwi.
So Mike, what kind of jobs have you had in the past? What kind of job titles have you had?
Oh, I've had some very exciting job titles. Developer, project manager, business analyst, program director, all very exciting.
And I've been known as a Mac operator, a designer, a digital producer, a digital wizard, all sorts of random names. In the future, though, there's going to be even more interesting names. A team out of the Canadian Scholarship Trust Plan have done some research, and with some foresight strategists, which is another name, to add to the list, they've come up with a list of possible names for the future, so vocations that our kids might be looking for right now or studying for right now. First up's telesurgeon. These surgeons operate remotely with robotic tools using human hands from the cloud somewhere on the other side of the planet.
Wow.
There's a simplicity expert, which sounds a bit complicated to me, but too interested in looking at how businesses can simplify and streamline their operations. There's a garbage designer. You can find creative ways to turn products or byproducts of manufacturing processes, like leftover waste material, into other products.
Sounds like
recycling to me.
That's a very cool one.
It is, yes. There's also the robotic counsellor. They're thinking by 2030, robotics will have evolved so much that robots will play a greater part in providing home care and services than they do today. Today they don't do that much. The robot counsellor will be a source for picking up the right bot for the family. We'll be observing and how families interact and identify their needs for their lifestyle.
Wow.
There's a healthcare navigator. That's interesting. These are professionals who teach patients and their loved ones about the ins and outs of complicated medical systems. I never would have thought that. I mean, our kids will be going through kindy about now. They'll probably need to jump into robotics class in standard 1, healthcare science by form 2 to get any of these jobs.
I could do with a healthcare navigator now, actually. That shouldn't be a future job. That should be a real job now.
Another cool one, the last one I can see on the list here is solar technology specialist. So these are specialists that own land where they manage large spread, solar power grids. They sell and harvest power to power stations and other communities. So basically you're farming the sun. Imagine
Awesome.
that.
That's very cool. New Zealand should get into that. And to follow up Raj's point there, we've also recently read that the cloud computing is the future is trying to kill you. This is aimed specifically at those people who work in the IT industry. Now, we all know the cloud is changing the world, but it's really starting to hit the pockets of the traditional tech companies. For instance, this report from channelregister.co.uk outlines how SAP is reported to be carrying out some unavoidable layoffs to help restructure itself for the cloud, while its earnings from traditional on-premise software continue to drop. And every New Zealander's favourite tech company, Oracle, their proprietary hardware division has consistently failed to meet analyst expectations as the company's giant bet on the on-premise integrated appliance future looks less and less wise. So what does this mean for you, the Kiwi IT worker? Well, don't expect the same old to keep you in the manner you've become accustomed to. So if you're a tin hugger, yeah, you know the guys, the service maintenance guy who looks after the machine that hums in the corner, someone that believes that you have to be in the office to do the job, or say you're a girl that's just come out of uni with a swag of traditional skills, then you're very likely, very soon, to be in a world of change. And that's change, mind you, not necessarily you're going to be out of work, as this new fancy world of the cloud still needs your skills. Also in reference to Raj's earlier story about the Auckland Hackathon, the government and their Result 9. Result 9, hands up who knows what the Result 9 are. I can tell you there are 10 of them. Go Google it and you'll find out what these are. The Result 9 team, or some of them, were involved in a startup weekend, Skunkworks, all around, very similar to the Auckland Hackathon, data. So over a recent weekend, the ever-connected and serial startup entrepreneur Dave Moskovitz brought together a band of people from the government's Result 9 team, mostly based at MB, the Ministry of Business, Industry and Innovation, and no, I got that wrong, you can look it up, and open data advocates like myself, and the commercial web dev guys, mostly from Rabbit. The idea was to see what can be really done with open data to help businesses. So after an intense few days, a lot of feedback went back to the government. Bridges were built, and I know at least one team that are going to continue with their idea. And they have got a cracking idea of how to use government data in an empathetic way for businesses. Hats off to them all, and congratulations to them. And in more Dave Moskovitz news, he was recently up in Auckland explaining to a packed event, the Project Disruption event, just how awesome Wellington is with startups. In essence, we're walkable, we have a solid supporting community, and we've got the best weather for getting shit done. If it's windy and rainy, you want to be inside and working.
Inside, beavering away.
Exactly. I agree with Dave when he says that a lot of work from a lot of people has gone into the past years, and it's starting to pay off here in Wellington, and it now has a different tech feel. And we're on the edge of something quite special, I believe. Of course, having Xero and TradeMe grow from here has shown the way. And that's what's happening this week in tech news in New Zealand.
That's great, Mike. You know, Wellington is quite renowned for that startup community. So what's the startup centre all about?
So Dave's points being around the advantage that Wellington has is its scale. I mean, everything is accessible within a 20-minute walk. He drew a great, on a Google map, he drew a circle and said that 20 minutes, end to end, so we can go and see everybody. He makes a good call, though, that you probably need 30 minutes to walk across it, because you will be bumping into a whole stack of people that you're going to know. That happens to me a lot. I remember when I first came here, actually, and I came here from London, and I was walking down Lambton Quay with a mate of mine that I'd met at the Department of Corrections. That's when I had one of my not-so-interesting job titles. And I was stunned by the number of people that said, "Hi, how you doing, Andrew? Nice to see you." And when I said, "How do you know all these people?" he said, "Well, it's Wellington for you." And that is such a community spirit and such an advantage that we have, particularly over some of the larger spread cities, naming no names.
Well, it's like a 2 degrees of separation rather than 6.
Exactly. The weather is an interesting one. I think that was actually stolen from a quote or a tweet that Sam Morgan made about the weather. It is so conducive to work in. If it's a crappy weather outside, are you going to go outside for lunch and sit around on those glorious Auckland beaches? No. No,
you'll be at your standing desk doing all the work you can do so you can go home early.
Get down to those craft beer bars first.
Yeah, that's right.
That's what we want to do in Wellington.
Well, that's the other thing about Wellington, the selection of breweries. It's ridiculous.
It's a great start. That's what I say. I don't say it's ridiculous at all, mate.
Ridiculous, good way.
It's interesting to say that, Dave, I'm not so sure about this. He says the government gets it. The city council is starting to get it here, that's for sure. They're starting to put effort and resources behind and less talk and more doing around actually helping startups, and particularly tech startups, with their ideas. I know they've got some there was talk about a tech hub coming. In Auckland, as I'm sure you'll be thinking, oh yeah, we got a couple of them already, mate. But I think there's a tech hub that's going to come. They're also looking into when there are startup tech ideas that come out that the council could use, making sure that they consciously and actively look towards those tech solutions to see how they could use them. The idea there, of course, is that if you can't sell to your own local government, you probably can't sell to the Japanese or the Chinese governments. So that's not such a cool idea.
Well, it's almost like practice what you preach first, right? You'd want to get it right at home, wouldn't you, before you go out and say, hey, look at how good this can be for your community.
Exactly. And so hopefully the council is behind that, and the local and the central government, of course. We've got a few of the ministries here, all of them, and they are looking towards the some of the, not just Wellington, to be fair, but everywhere else, but the startups and the smaller, more innovative companies that we've got here. I know Rabbit, for instance, are a web company that have done a lot of very innovative web design and app design, and they're getting quite a lot of traction with the government. When we look at the Inland Revenue, I don't know if you know about the Raj, they had that app competition recently.
Oh,
did you hear about that?
No.
It was an app for IR, and it was they had over 1,000 entries, and it was how could you create and design an app for the Inland Revenue to help Kiwi citizens and businesses interact with the Inland Revenue.
So you can file your returns without timing out and crashing and blah, blah, blah.
All of that stuff.
That'd be good, yeah.
So they're starting to look out. They're starting to look out of the traditional, large, we can do it ourselves necessarily, and look to the smaller, innovative companies. And Wellington, of course, we're right on their doorstep. It's a lot easier to come and deal with us guys. Oh, I'm talking about Xero. I mean, Xero's not a startup. I don't know if it ever was a startup, actually.
Did it begin? It started.
It started. You're very right. That's at some point, I suppose, there was...
With a hiss and a roar, it started.
Well, that's right. It did go pretty big pretty quickly. But no, it was a startup. Only, 4 years ago? Pretty amazing.
Better, yeah.
And they're now in the UK, actively going around. In the UK, they have the concept of a milk run. I don't know if that's what they're doing, which is when you go to all the universities and you tout your wares, come work for us. And they're actively saying, come to Wellington, and Auckland, to be fair. And part of the story that they're telling is it's an amazing place to
so
come
they want
work.
people to come here. I thought they were just, recruiting for their local... So they're going to start up in the UK one.
They've certainly got that. They are opening up. They've got 17 offices now or something around the world.
Wow.
But I think this particular focus is actually bringing devs and UX people to New Zealand.
That's awesome. Though there's a bit of a gap in the market, right? There's a few development houses out there that are all looking for things like front-end developers, and they're finding it hard to recruit at the moment anyway.
They are, you're right. One of the... and where do we get these people from, of course? Well, we either do what Xero does, so we go and import them, like I was imported many years ago, or we grow our own. The issue with possibly the traditional education route at the moment is that IT moves so fast. So by the time they've got a course up that's dedicated to it, we've all moved on.
That's right, yeah. I found that when I was studying design and graphics, using some of the packages. By the time I learned some of them, they were obsolete when I was out in the market.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, some of the jobs that the traditional big boys are going to want in the major organisations and government departments, the project managers, all those titles we talked about before. Look, they're going to be around for years, and they're always going to be wanted. They may change in what they want to do, how they work. So a project manager may not be traditional in that sense of waterfall, but it might be an agile project manager or Scrum Master. There you go. There's your title for you, mate. It's
kind of hard to explain on a business card, though, isn't it?
I was reading just recently about there's a company called Optimal BI. I don't know if you know them. They're a Wellington-based startup. Oh, you move from startup to what? Survivalist?
Startup to I've got some money.
Yeah.
Then I've burnt all that money on hiring staff. Then I have no money. I start developing on weekends. And then someone finally gives you some more money. That's where a good business development manager comes in really handy.
That's true. Well, they've moved on past from that stage, and they've been around for about 4 years as well, I believe. And one of the things that they talk about is they don't give people job titles. They just hire people and say, you describe what you do, so that when people say what you do, what's your title, you can roll out something that
The elevator pitch.
Yeah. And I saw their support team with the removing chaos or
That's
something
nice.
like that. I thought, that's a good way of putting it.
Mine used to be for when I was doing Photoshop work. I make pretty pictures.
I worked with a guy recently, and I've known him for a number of years, and he was at one point, his title was Internet Evangelist.
Oh, yeah.
And I went,
Vince Cerf, that's his title at Google.
is it really?
Yeah.
Ooh, well, maybe I'll just put his title onto someone else. Internet something.
He's an internet evangelist.
James will let me know.
By default, Google evangelist.
Yes, exactly. Internet evangelist. I think that's a great idea. Have titles that mean something. Whenever I meet somebody, I say, what do you do? And they always tell me their title. I go, that's fantastic.
I'm an account manager.
What do you do? Yes. Here in the Wellington startup scene, though, the what do you do is very often, if you'll talk to a lot of people, is I've got a startup. It's such a normal thing to do. It's not a...
Quite entrepreneurial in New Zealand, though. Everyone has something they're tinkering around with at home somewhere. And most will leave it there and work at 9 to 5, as I call them. They work somewhere. But the odd, 20, 30% of the population will actually give it a crack. And then, get some good feedback or encouragement. And off they go, it's really good. Like the guy, the vodka guy, what's his name? Jeff Ross. The vodka, out of his garage.
So, the tech scene in Wellington is... It's been here for a long time. It's been quite bizarre. In my view, I reckon it's been a story. It's been a mythology it's been around for a lot. And people have talked about it. But it's only in the last year maybe, that I've noticed that it's actually taking off. There are businesses now that are growing other businesses. So, for instance, Hoist Apps, I don't know those. It's Owen's company.
Yeah.
That came out of Xero, of course. So, Xero is now letting free some of their staff. That's a one way to put it. But, they're budding, they're off, and they're growing their own businesses. And they've learned so much from being in
Well, I just
Xero.
looked through the partner list on Xero's website, like Vend and iPayroll and everybody else. They're all cracking on, all these small companies. There's quite a few of them now that all plug in.
Yeah.
So they would have nowhere to really plug in unless someone like Xero was around.
Yeah.
It's got to tag along, So that's quite cool. So if we can get a few more Xeros, a few more of those Vens that can tag on to Xeros,
Absolutely.
that would be great.
Yeah.
And we could export that instead of, cows and sheep.
Well, actually, I don't see not instead of, but as well as.
Well, yeah, there's that.
Why not do both?
Yeah.
We do have this, we're only big enough for one industry type attitude. And it's like, no, we can have Fonterra being massive and we can have Xero being massive.
Yeah.
Why can't we have lots of these massive companies doing it? We're currently recording this in Miramar.
Yeah. It's going to go global.
That's a fairly large industry that was built up around here. Again, one person. That's the film industry,
Sure. Yeah.
the movie industry, and certainly the sci-fi industry. The tech, the FX.
And the swords and chainmail scenario.
Yeah, so, it can be done as well as, and we can do this in Wellington. And I think the cross-pollination between those industries. So I know the guys here, of course, if you're working in Weather FX, you're working computers. So they know the people at Xero and they talk. And out of Weather FX, of course, came a great success. It just got bought by Microsoft. You heard the green button?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's such a good idea.
Yeah.
Green button. Such a smart idea.
So there's another one that's just, unfortunately, it's not unfortunate at all. The money there will eventually start ending up in Microsoft's pockets.
Oh,
but then that's life. It started and it's grown and now it's got the staff. So that's not a problem. I don't see that.
It's the circle of life in tech. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, all in all, I think Wellington is starting to believe and live its own mess and story, and it's really starting to happen here, and it's fantastic to see and be a part of it.
It'd be great. And then we're going to try and get some of these people involved with this podcast, and hopefully we can pick their brains and get their insights on what they're actually up to. And maybe it'll help people out there start up their own little startup.
Absolutely. So I've always spoken to some people from Lightning Lab, and they're keen to be interviewed, so we'll be talking with them. I've also got some of the other web startup people that want to have a chat with us. So yeah, absolutely, we're going to be getting them on the podcast. And if you've got any questions that guys want to ask of the Xero type people or the Lightning Lab startup type people, drop us an email, get in touch with us, and we'll put those questions to them.
We will actually need to set up an email.
We don't have one yet.
There's a hashtag radio email, so I'll get that out to you on Twitter or something. But in the first instance, you could probably contact Mike or I via our Twitter handles anyway.
So thanks for that. This is our first one. I've now got myself a microphone.
Yeah.
I hope it works.
Sounding all Barry White and everything.
Sorry. Yeah. I've never been called Barry White for many reasons. I don't think it's going to work now. But I wanted to just say a quick shout out to our first listeners, especially to Gavin and Jack. And thanks, guys, for the enthusiasm and support. And thanks for waiting for a number of weeks before our first one.
We've got our act together.
We are getting into a rhythm.
Yes.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. And if you want to find out more about us or this podcast, you can find out about Mike on Twitter at Miramar Mike, myself, Raj, at NZ Raj, and you can follow the podcast on at #radio. We can go to #me.co.nz for more content. We've got articles and all sorts of goodness up there, and that's how you can contact us in the meantime.
Thanks for your time, and we will see you on the next podcast, which I guarantee, it's a personal guarantee, will be with you next Tuesday. Cheers, guys.
See you next time.
#me.co.nz